The night was quiet, too quiet. Rain fell softly against the window of a small apartment, where Aisha sat curled up with a book in her hands. Her favorite novel, The Crimson Bloom. A tragic love story set in an ancient magical empire, filled with royal scandals, betrayal, and a beautiful villainess named Lady Valeria Eleanor von Seraphine. Aisha had read it countless times. She knew every line, every heartbreak, and every time she wept for the same person, Valeria, the cold-hearted noblewoman who everyone hated. In the end, Valeria was cast aside, betrayed, and executed for crimes she didn't fully commit. The world saw her as a monster, but Aisha saw her pain. She always thought the villainess deserved a second chance. If I were her, Aisha murmured softly, I'd live differently. I'd make everyone see who she truly was. Thunder rolled outside, echoing her words. She looked up from the book. The pages shimmered faintly under the lightning's glow. Her eyes widened. The ink seemed to move. What? A blinding flash filled the room. The sound of glass shattering tore through her ears, and before she could even scream, everything went black. A faint scent of roses woke her. The air was warm, heavy with perfume and magic. She stirred, feeling soft sheets beneath her fingers, silk, embroidered with crimson petals. Aisha slowly opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was painted gold. The bed was enormous. Sunlight filtered through red velvet curtains. Where am I? Her voice sounded different, calm, elegant, mature. Confused, she looked down at her hands. Pale skin, perfect nails, a ruby ring glimmering on her finger. Her heart raced as she stumbled toward the mirror across the room. The reflection staring back was not hers. Silver hair flowed down her shoulders like moonlight. Crimson eyes glowed like embers. Her lips curved into a natural, regal pout. The woman in the mirror was breathtaking and terrifyingly familiar. No, it can't be. She touched her face in disbelief. It was Lady Valeria Eleanor von Seraphine, the villainess. Aisha's mind spun. She remembered the thunder, the book, the light. Somehow, she had fallen into the world of the novel. Oh no. No, no, no. This isn't possible. Before she could think further, the door flew open. A young maid rushed in, face pale with panic. And my lady, you're awake. Thank the stars. His Grace has been worried sick. The Crown Prince awaits your apology for what happened at the palace yesterday. Apology? Aisha echoed, blinking. Yes, my lady. For the insult to Lady Elena. Everyone is still speaking of it. The nobles are furious. Aisha froze. Pieces of memory flickered in her mind. Words from the book she once read. The cruel banquet. The shattered glass. Valeria's cold voice echoing through the hall. She knew this story. She knew what would happen next. If she didn't act carefully, this was the moment that would mark her downfall. Taking a shaky breath, she steadied. She steadied herself. Tell my father and the Crown Prince that I'll come shortly, she said softly. The maid blinked, startled. And my lady? You're not angry? Aisha managed a faint smile. No. I've already caused enough trouble. It's time I fix what I've broken. The maid bowed, confused but relieved, and hurried away. Silence filled the room again. Aisha turned back toward the mirror, her reflection staring back like a stranger. So this is the world of the Crimson Bloom, she whispered. And I'm the villainess everyone fears. She lifted her hand. The ruby ring caught the light, faintly pulsing with a red glow, like a heartbeat. The air around her shimmered, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard a whisper, soft, ancient, and sorrowful. Do not run from the curse, or it will find you again. Aisha froze. Who's there? But there was no answer, only the faint sound of petals brushing against the window pane. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and faced her reflection with newfound resolve. If fate wants me to be a villainess, she whispered, her crimson eyes shining with determination, then I'll become one the heavens themselves will bless. Outside, The crimson petals of the Seraphine estate fluttered in the wind, and for the first time in centuries, they shimmered softly with light. Morning sunlight filtered through the crimson curtains, spilling across the golden floor of Lady Valeria's chamber. The air was fragrant with roses, too perfect, too still, like the calm before a storm. Aisha sat before the mirror, gazing at the unfamiliar reflection. The woman staring back was flawless, regal, and dangerous. Even her slightest movement carried the grace of nobility and the shadow of arrogance that had once doomed her. She had spent the entire night trying to remember every detail from the novel. Every name, every scene, every mistake the real Valeria had made. If she wanted to survive in this world, she couldn't afford to repeat them. A faint knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she said softly. The maid from last night stepped in, her eyes nervous. "And my lady, Duke Seraphine requests your presence in the main hall. The Crown Prince is already here." Aisha's stomach tightened. The confrontation. This was where Valeria had once insulted Elena again, sealing her fate. She stood, smoothing the crimson gown draped over her frame, a gown fit for a villainess. The ruby necklace at her throat glowed faintly, as if alive. "Lead the way," she whispered. The hall of House Seraphine was vast, adorned with portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her. At the end of the room stood Duke Seraphine, tall and severe, with the same silver hair and piercing gaze as hers. Beside him was the Crown Prince, Adrian, golden-haired and cold-eyed, the Empire's most beloved heir. And just behind him stood Elena, the soft, pure-hearted noble girl Aisha remembered as the novel's true heroine. The air was thick with tension. "Lady Valeria," the Duke said sharply, "you will apologize to Lady Elena for your behavior yesterday." Aisha bowed her head gracefully. "I understand, father." Adrian's eyes flickered in surprise. The real Valeria had never bowed to anyone, not even him. Aisha stepped forward and faced Elena. The girl's hands trembled as she curtsied, her expression fearful but kind. "Lady Elena," Aisha began gently, "I spoke without thinking. I let jealousy cloud my words, and I wounded your dignity. Please forgive me." Gasps filled the hall. Servants whispered. Even her father stared, speechless. Elena blinked, startled by the sincerity in Valeria's voice. "Lady Valeria, I accept your apology." "Thank you." Aisha smiled faintly, warmth spreading through her chest. She had changed the first thread of fate. But as she straightened, she felt a sharp sting in her chest. The ruby on her necklace flared crimson. The Crown Prince frowned. "Are you unwell, Lady Valeria?" "I'm fine," she managed to say. "Just a little dizzy." The glow faded. No one else seemed to notice, but she knew that feeling. It wasn't just pain. It was the curse. Later that day, back in her chambers, Aisha removed the necklace and placed it on the vanity. The ruby pulsed again, like a living heart. She leaned closer to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, and for a moment, it moved on its own. The reflection smiled faintly, her eyes darker, colder. "Do you really think kindness will save you?" the voice in her mind whispered. "This body carries the blood of the cursed. No matter what you do, the petals will still fall." Aisha stepped back, trembling. "Who are you?" The reflection laughed softly, the sound like shattering glass. "I am what remains of her, the true Valeria." The mirror shimmered with faint light, and the ruby necklace on the table began to hum. Aisha's breath quickened as visions flooded her mind. Fire, screams, red petals falling like rain. She was cursed, the voice whispered. Every woman born to the Seraphine line was bound to lose everything they loved. That is why she turned cruel. That is why she hated the heroine. That is why she died. Tears filled Aisha's eyes. Then maybe it's time to break the curse. The reflection tilted her head, intrigued. No one has ever broken it. Then I'll be the first. Her reflection smiled again, this time softer, almost sad. "We'll see." The mirror dimmed, and silence returned. Aisha sank onto the edge of the bed, her heart racing. The empire outside gleamed with gold, but she knew now that beneath its beauty, darkness waited, and her fate was bound to it. She looked toward the window, where crimson petals drifted past like falling stars. "This world calls me a villainess," she whispered, "but I'll rewrite its story, even if I have to fight destiny itself." Outside, the wind stirred. The crimson petals shimmered again, brighter than before, as if answering her resolve. The morning of the royal tea gathering arrived like a breath of silver wind, gentle, but filled with unspoken tension. Aisha, now known to all as Lady Valeria Seraphine, stood before her mirror once again. The reflection that once terrified her now looked almost determined. Gone was the sharp, heartless villainess who had sneered at the world. In her place stood a woman ready to face fate itself. Her maid, Clara, laced the final ribbon on her gown, a soft lavender silk trimmed with white lace. "My lady, this color suits you beautifully. You look kinder today," Clara said shyly. Aisha smiled faintly. "That's the goal." As she pinned a single white rose to her bodice, she whispered to herself, "Today's the day I change the story." The royal garden was dazzling that morning, fountains of crystal water, tables draped in gold, and noble women laughing behind jeweled fans. At the center sat Crown Prince Adrian, the sun glinting off his golden hair, his eyes distant and unreadable. Beside him, Lady Elena looked radiant yet nervous, her pale pink gown matching the blush on her cheeks. The moment Valeria entered, whispers rippled through the garden like wind through leaves. "Lady Valeria came? After what happened last time? How bold. She'll ruin the tea again, you'll see." Aisha ignored them. Her steps were steady, her smile calm. When she curtsied before the crown prince, her movements were graceful, respectful. "Your Highness, thank you for inviting me," she said softly. For a brief moment, Adrian's cold eyes softened. "Lady Valeria, it's surprising to see you here. You usually avoid such gatherings." "I thought it was time I faced the people I once wronged," she replied gently. Elena blinked, startled again by Valeria's tone. The tea began. Silver trays of pastries, crystal cups filled with golden liquid, and laughter flowing through the air, though always with an undercurrent of tension. Lady Muriel, one of the gossiping noblewomen, leaned close to Elena with a smirk. "My Lady Elena, I heard your dress was made by a commoner tailor. How quaint." A few others chuckled behind their fans. Elena's face fell. This was how it started in the novel. The moment Valeria joined in the mockery, pushing Elena into tears before the crown prince, but not this time. Aisha set down her teacup and looked directly at Muriel. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were like steel. "Lady Muriel," she said smoothly, "are you implying that class defines beauty? Because if so, perhaps you should reconsider your reflection before judging another." Silence fell. The nobles froze, eyes wide. Elena looked up in shock, her lips parting slightly. "Lady Valeria," she whispered. Aisha smiled faintly. Lady Elena's gown is elegant and graceful, proof that true refinement lies in taste, not title. The crown prince leaned back, watching her closely. There was something new in his gaze, curiosity, even admiration. "You've changed, Lady Valeria," he murmured. "Perhaps I've simply remembered who I'm supposed to be," she answered softly. As the sun dipped lower, the tea ended with a strange peace. No one dared insult Elena again, and the whispers about Valeria turned from scorn to confusion. When the guests began to leave, Elena approached her quietly. "Lady Valeria, thank you. You didn't have to defend me." Aisha looked at her. This gentle, pure heroine she once envied. "I didn't do it for you alone," she said kindly. "I did it for myself and for the person I want to become." Elena smiled. Shy and warm. "Then I hope we can start anew." "We already have." From across the courtyard, the crown prince's gaze lingered on Valeria longer than before. He spoke quietly to his aide. "She's not the same woman anymore." The aide frowned. "Your Highness?" "There's something different in her eyes," Adrian said, his expression thoughtful. "Something real." That night, when Aisha returned to her chamber, She found a single crimson petal lying on her pillow, glowing faintly under the moonlight. She picked it up, her heart heavy with both fear and hope. The mirror shimmered again, and her reflection appeared. "You changed the first event," the reflection whispered. "The story is bending." "Good," Aisha replied firmly. "Then it means fate can be rewritten." The reflection smiled faintly, though her eyes looked almost sad. "Be careful, Valeria. Every choice you change comes with a price. The curse does not like to be defied." "Then let it come," Aisha said, holding the glowing petal tightly. "I'm not the same as before." The wind outside stirred again, and this time, instead of crimson, a single white petal drifted through the open window. The royal palace was quieter than usual that evening. The crown prince's private study, lit by the soft glow of candlelight, smelled faintly of parchment and roses, the latter brought in daily by his attendants, though no one knew why the prince favored crimson flowers so much. Adrian sat at his desk, reviewing the reports from the tea gathering. Every account mentioned the same shocking detail. Lady Valeria Seraphine had defended Lady Elena rather than insulted her. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed slightly. "Lady Valeria," he murmured. "What game are you playing this time?" He remembered her words clearly, the calm, graceful tone that didn't belong to the fiery, cruel woman he once knew. "Perhaps I've simply remembered who I'm supposed to be," she had said. That voice had sounded sincere, almost tired. Adrian sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He had known Valeria since childhood. She was brilliant, beautiful, and dangerously proud. Her temper had made her a weapon in social circles, her charm both admired and feared. But now there was something human in her eyes, something that frightened him more than her cruelty ever had. Meanwhile, in the Seraphine estate, Aisha sat by her window under the pale moonlight, reading through the old journal she had found in the library that afternoon. The cover bore the same crest that was engraved on her family's mirror, a blooming crimson rose entwined by thorns. Inside, she discovered faded ink and trembling handwriting. "To the one who bears the Seraphine blood, beware the petals that fall crimson. Each act of cruelty feeds the curse. Each act of mercy may lighten it. But to change the past is to pay the future." Her hand trembled slightly. "So, every time I do something good, it breaks the curse bit by bit," she whispered. "But there's a cost." She didn't know yet what that cost would be, only that she had already started down a path she couldn't turn back from. A knock sounded at her door. "Come in," Aisha said. Clara entered, holding a sealed letter with the royal crest. "My lady, a messenger just delivered this from the crown prince." Aisha blinked. "From the crown prince?" The maid nodded and left quietly, leaving Aisha alone with the letter. She hesitated before breaking the seal. The letter read, "Lady Valeria Seraphine, I request your presence at the palace tomorrow morning. There are matters I wish to discuss personally. Do not be late. Crown Prince Adrian of Ethelin." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. "So soon," she murmured. She knew this moment too. In the original story, this was when the crown prince summoned Valeria to humiliate her publicly for her jealousy toward Elena. But this time, the reason might be different. She folded the letter carefully and looked out at the moonlit sky. "If this is a test," she whispered, "then I'll pass it with grace." The next morning, the grand marble halls of the palace echoed softly with her footsteps. Every noble who passed turned to stare at her, some with suspicion, some with curiosity. She entered the crown prince's study. Adrian stood near the window, sunlight framing him like a painting, tall, poised, and impossibly distant. He turned slowly as she entered. "Lady Valeria, you came." "Of course, Your Highness," she said, curtsying. "You summoned me." Adrian studied her in silence. His gaze was sharp, but there was a faint confusion behind it. "You've changed." "So I've heard." "No, not in the way people change with time. It's as if you've become someone else entirely." Aisha's heart thudded. For a moment, she feared he could somehow see the truth, that she was someone else. "Perhaps I simply grew tired of being hated," she replied softly. Adrian took a slow step forward. You defended Lady Elena. That was unexpected. Maybe she deserved kindness, not cruelty. You used to despise her. Aisha met his gaze, calm but steady. People are not meant to stay the same forever, Your Highness. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The air between them grew heavy, almost electric. Then Adrian sighed and looked away, though a faint smile touched his lips. If this is a new beginning, Lady Valeria, I hope it lasts. For your sake.
It will, she said.
As she turned to leave, Adrian called out, Lady Valeria. She paused. The next royal banquet is in 3 days, he said quietly. Attend it. I wish to see who you are becoming. When she left the study, Adrian stared at the closed door for a long time. Something deep inside him whispered that this woman, the one standing in Valeria's place, was not the same one he once knew. And for reasons he couldn't understand, that thought made his heart beat just a little faster. That night, as Aisha removed her jewelry, the mirror shimmered again. Her reflection smiled faintly. He's beginning to notice, it whispered. Aisha frowned. The Crown Prince.
Yes.
The story is bending faster than before. Be careful, Valeria. The closer he comes to you, the more the curse awakens. Then I'll just have to stay ahead of fate, she said firmly. As the reflection faded, a faint crack appeared across the mirror's edge, so small she didn't notice it. But in the distance, far beyond the palace walls, crimson petals began to scatter once again, and the wind whispered, as if something ancient was stirring. The palace glittered like 1,000 stars had descended upon it. Chandeliers shimmered, violins sang, and the air was heavy with perfume and anticipation. The royal banquet of Ethelyn was not merely a celebration. It was a stage where alliances were made and hearts were silently broken. Aisha, or Lady Valeria Seraphine, entered the grand ballroom wearing a gown unlike any she'd worn before. It was woven in moonlight silver, embroidered with faint crimson threads that caught the candlelight like living fire. Every eye turned toward her. Is that really Lady Valeria? She looks divine. No, that can't be her. Valeria would never smile like that. Whispers rippled through the crowd as she moved gracefully across the marble floor. Each step was deliberate, confident, yet gentle. Even those who had once despised her found themselves speechless. At the far end of the room, the Crown Prince stood, dressed in royal blue, his golden eyes fixed on her from the moment she appeared. For the first time in years, Adrian forgot to hide his emotions. She's radiant, he murmured, his aide barely hearing the words. The music softened as Valeria curtsied before the throne. Your Majesty, Your Highness. The king, an aging but sharp-eyed ruler, regarded her carefully. Lady Seraphine, your presence honors us tonight. It has been long since you attended court events. The honor is mine, Your Majesty, she replied with grace. Adrian stepped forward, offering his hand. Would you grant me the first dance, Lady Valeria? A hush fell over the hall. Even Elena looked startled, her fan trembling in her hand. Aisha hesitated only for a moment before placing her gloved hand in his. It would be my pleasure, Your Highness. As the orchestra began to play, they moved across the floor, steps perfectly in sync, like echoes of an old memory. Adrian's gaze never left hers. You've surprised everyone tonight, he said quietly. Including you? Especially me. She smiled faintly. Perhaps that's a good thing. He twirled her gently, their reflection gliding across the polished floor. If this is who you truly are, Lady Valeria, then I regret not seeing it sooner. You weren't meant to, she said softly, eyes flickering with sadness. And why is that? Because some stories aren't written for happy endings. For a brief second, Adrian saw something behind her smile, pain, knowledge, and a strange, haunting acceptance. It unsettled him. He tightened his hold slightly, as if afraid she might disappear. When the dance ended, applause erupted. Valeria curtsied again, but before she could step back, another voice cut through the crowd. Your Highness, may I have the next dance? All heads turned. Standing at the edge of the crowd was Lord Lucien d'Artois, the Duke's only son, tall, composed, with storm-gray eyes that gleamed with quiet strength. Aisha froze.
Lucien.
She remembered him well. In the original novel, he was the second male lead, loyal to Elena until the very end, the one who sacrificed his life for her. He was the kind of man who loved silently, fiercely, and without reward. Now he was walking toward her. Adrian's expression hardened ever so slightly. Lord Lucien, it seems Lady Valeria might need rest after our dance. Lucien smiled politely. Then I shall make it a gentle one. Adrian hesitated, then released her hand reluctantly. As you wish. The next song began, slower, softer, filled with unspoken longing. You've changed, Lady Valeria, Lucien said quietly as they danced. You used to mock people like me. And now, she asked, now you seem like someone I've met in a dream. Aisha's heart skipped. His words held warmth, sincerity, and something deeper. Perhaps we met in another life, she replied with a faint smile. Lucien's eyes softened. If we did, then I must have failed you there too. You could never fail me, my lord, she said gently. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to blur, music fading, lights dimming, time itself slowing. When she blinked, she thought she saw something impossible, a faint crimson glow wrapping around Lucien's wrist, like a thread connecting to her own. The mirror's warning echoed in her mind. The closer they come to you, the more the curse awakens. She stepped back slightly, her pulse racing. Lucien frowned. Are you all right, Lady Valeria? Yes, just a little dizzy, she lied. Before he could say more, a sudden gust swept through the ballroom, extinguishing half the candles. Nobles gasped. The air turned cold. At that moment, a single crimson petal drifted down from the ceiling, glowing faintly before landing on the floor between Adrian and Valeria. The crown prince's eyes narrowed. What was that? Aisha's heart pounded. She knew. The curse had stirred again. And this time, it had done so because both men's hearts had started to turn toward her. The rest of the night passed in uneasy splendor. Adrian's gaze followed her wherever she went, while Lucien lingered nearby with quiet protectiveness. Elena, ever gentle, watched the shifting tension with confusion, unaware of the storm quietly building around her friend. As the banquet drew to a close, Aisha slipped away into the moonlit corridor, her mind racing. The curse reacts to feelings, she whispered. Then, what happens when they both fall in love? Her reflection shimmered faintly on the polished glass of a nearby window. Then, it whispered back, the story will demand a tragedy. Aisha closed her eyes, tears glinting under her lashes. Then I'll change that too.